Environmental changes are happening so fast. In fact, everything around us is just happening so fast. Time seems to be the one thing that we don't really have. So fortunately, AI comes to the rescue because it is indeed helping us accelerate the way we process information about the changes all around us in all the Earth systems, and in fact helping us to actually create useful analytics to translate that information into something that decisions can actually act upon and act with confidence and resolve. In the space of Earth systems monitoring specifically, AI is really everywhere. It's powerful in classifying images at a scale and a detail that used to be unprecedented before. A particular favorite case of mine from the work that we do is mapping all the world's ecosystems by ecosystem types. We used to, over decades, to be able to map land use with 10 classes. So you just kind of determine where certain vegetation classes is, where water bodies are. But if you really think about the breadth and the richness of the vegetation and ecosystems, they're so different. There are so many different types of forests which actually have different value as they provide different services. So to account for all of these types of differences, it used to take enormous efforts and in fact, it was not very easy. That's why we only limited ourselves to identifying 10 types of these classes. Now, we're really using space technology to map 110 classes. And that allows us to put nature on the balance sheet. That allows us to treat these forests, this seagrass, these grasslands, as those vital strategic assets as we would treat other assets that we operate, and monitor their change over time, as well as condition, their level of degradation. All of this is being powered by artificial intelligence. And that's really critical because, as I said, the pace of change is outpacing our own action. Policymakers are struggling to actually get ahead of these crises. So AI is truly crucial. But hopefully we'll get to the point where we get to say that it doesn't solve all the issues.
Thank you. Robbie, I know that Planet complements a lot of these efforts very well. So from your perspective, how has AI integration enhanced your satellite data analysis?
Yeah, and thanks again for organizing this, and it's great to be here at the World Governance Summit. So AI is been around for a long time. And about 10 years ago, it was all the rage with convolutional neural nets and doing computer vision work and machine learning on top of it. And it's, at least for us in our company, we take 4 million pictures, 49 megapixel pictures every single day. That entire data pipeline has been done with CNNs. They've been done with efficient technologies and continuously adapted over time since our organization's been around for 13, coming on 14 years. So we couldn't do the basic things to deliver our imagery services to our customers without doing that. But the real power of these types of technology comes from extracting useful insights out of it, quickly.
Go ahead. Could you talk about some initiatives that you've?
Yeah. So again, using more of that legacy technology from the end of last decade, you can extract out classification, for instance, and classification of what's on the Earth, and those could be physical assets like roads and buildings and ships and planes. They could also be different types of grasslands, and I think over the last 3 or 4 years, now that there are a lot of cloud-native geospatial standards, data can be combined together to then extract insights out of multiple data sources, and that's a level of data product that we call a level 4 data product, which is really the pivot point between knowing remote sensing science and being a data scientist. Where if you just want to know the surface temperature of any point on the Earth or how much water is in soil, or how productive a particular crop is, or the amount of carbon that's stored above ground in a tree. Those are all now physics-based, so they're based in science, these models, but it uses AI in order to make that efficient, to then have a foundational level of analytics that are really quite horizontal. And so that's what we focus on as a company, is we collect unique information, we make it accessible to our partners in ecosystem. So we're more of a horizontal organization, and we have dozens and dozens of companies that have built their products on top of our platform where they specialize into a particular application.
Again, with Frank's, Frank from Capella has a lot of complementary components with the two of you on stage, but I would like to focus on data equity and access. With private companies leading in Earth observation data collection, how can we ensure that critical environmental data is accessible to all, especially nations lacking their own observation infrastructure?
It's a great question. And first, I want to thank WGS for bringing me back out to Dubai, third time this year. So it's been exciting to be out here so many times. And actually, the first time I was out here in the space program was actually May 27th, 2015, when I was at the Global Space Satellite Forum. So it's been a long time engaging, and it's been a wild ride actually to watch the UAE get to this point. To get to your question specifically, though, really when we talk about this infrastructure, these sensors on orbit, and the ability to have access to that data, part of the infrastructure that allows us to do that is the economics behind those countries that are consuming those sensors and that data, providing a revenue stream and an economic model that allows us to share that information then much more broadly. And I'll use as an example a project that we're currently doing with the University of Tokyo, Riken Science Institute, and ETH out of Zurich, and Microsoft, where the goal was to advance future disaster response efforts and building damage assessment by combining optical imagery, Robbie lives in that world all day, with SAR, synthetic aperture radar, the ability to see those objects at night through cloud cover and those types of things, and be able to create a comprehensive baseline data set for building AI modeling tools. This is one of the core components for sharing this information out. And since the infrastructure is already on orbit, we have a lot of flexibility in supporting these types of projects. And so the solution is a program called BRIGHT, which is an open access data set covering 12 global regions across 5 natural disasters and 2 man-made disasters for advancing disaster relief efforts in developing countries and throughout the world. And so really it comes down to a cooperative environment where the infrastructure is being paid for those that can afford it, and those that are driving the innovation in a lot of cases, but it then is consumed on a global basis so that we can support projects like this.
Wonderful, thank you. And
can I mention one thing on that? So I'm glad that you're working with the Microsoft AI for Good Lab. It's a really, really good group. And just as another example, how quickly some of the analytics and AI is coming along. We started partnering with them when right after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where we opened up about a weekly base map of all of the Ukraine to make that available to a number of allied partners, and we made it available to our partner Microsoft AI for Good Lab, and it took them about 2 months to fine-tune a model to just do building damage assessment, and that was 2022. And then 2023, there was the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, if you remember that. And so we flew down, and in 2 days, we fine-tuned that model to be relevant to the geology of the area, then made that available. And then last year, in the fire in Lahaina in Hawaii, within 2 hours, we made that available. Then now, also with the fires down in LA, it is now a service to be able to have a real-time building damage assessment that immediately goes to social media, that immediately goes to, in this case, the American Red Cross and first responders and CAL FIRE, to then all be on a common operating picture. And that type of stuff would normally have taken experts weeks to do an appropriate classification like that and issue a report. These are now trusted, they are accurate enough, and what matters the most, especially when minutes equals lives, is speed.
Yeah, entirely. Timing is critical when it comes to these emergencies, really. I know that Jana has some thoughts on this as well. We were talking backstage. Can you please weigh in here on how the Group of on Earth observations facilitate global accessibility to such data?
Sure. Well, equity is actually sort of part of our ethos. From 20 years ago, we got stood up because, especially back in early 2000s, there were no private satellite companies really, at least certainly not as many as there are today. And so the whole satellite industry really was the remit of the governments and in the global north. And it was expensive, but yet it was always the countries in the global south, as we say, that really struggled with development issues, with disaster risk management issues. So the reason we came to be was because it was believed that information has to be shared and must be made available to everyone everywhere. So this principle of making things open and democratizing access to data and now information has been with us for the past 20 years. So we really love the kind of work that creates open resources. And it's not just about equity in terms of access, it's also what fuels innovation. I think the reason why companies like Planet and Capella and others have flourished is because they really build on the efforts of the giants in the public sector who put all of that data science research out there into the public domain, and then they were able to produce that extra capabilities. So now in the space of AI, we work with incredible groups and with funding of really those who do believe in equity to create foundational models that are open models, which means even AI can be democratized. You do not have to be a private entity or an agency in Canada or in Japan to make use of it. Foundational models these days can actually be deployed in local indigenous communities. You know, as an indigenous person, having your own knowledge and that traditional knowledge, you can actually leverage that cutting edge technology, but really label it, train it with that intricate knowledge, which satellites, will not recognize as a pattern. So it creates a really robust and powerful application that is fit for purpose and is really breaking down these access barriers.
Are there any case studies that you can that come front of mind when you talk about that and accessibility?
Lots, frankly, a lot. I think I'll pick one, and it's a really interesting case. It's a Northwestern Territory in Canada where the Indigenous peoples worked with data scientists and technologists to create an artificial intelligence model that allows them to optimize their fishing in locations and at times where there is abundance of resources, and it really saves everybody time, saves everybody cost, and does it in a sensitive, ethical way without jeopardizing any of the traditional practices that the communities really guard. So creating these social contracts between the technologists and the communities who live on the ground creates kind of a win-win, where using remote sensing technology and information about the changing patterns in the weather and climate, they get the benefit of understanding what shifts are happening that may be causing them to see the fish and resources not being there where they used to be, but their intricate knowledge also allows them to create better accuracy in the application of those models. So it's just one of so many cases.
And one of the key components to making that happen is making sure that the economics play out effectively, right? I mean, it costs money to put the satellites on orbit and to maintain the infrastructure, run the operations, And if the economics are playing out well, then many people across the globe can benefit from these systems. But I think it takes an approach from a company perspective to see it beyond just the immediate revenue of the highest paying customer, right? And we need to look at our capability at more from a global perspective and how it can affect the entire community. Sometimes it's a very specific community that is interested in the capability. They may not have the funds, right, to do and put up satellites and build these kinds of constellations. But again, if the infrastructure is there, the flexibility for us to operate those as companies and make choices that allow us to help and support and really critically in a reliable way, right? Because once you start affecting a community in the way that you're talking about, we need to be reliable to that community. And so that's, for me, it's all about building that ecosystem that aligns the economic value of what we're doing with the consumption side.
Yeah, entirely. Across the range of examples that you've given, time is critical, and
yes,
latency and time equals a waste of resources at the end of the day.
That's right. And we don't always know where a crisis is going to occur, right, on the planet.
Yeah.
And so one of the huge advantages of having this infrastructure already on orbit, right, is that we already have the ability to respond to pretty much any place on the Earth at any time of day or night. And so, you don't know when the next earthquake or the next mudslide or the next fire is going to break out in the Earth. And so our infrastructure being in place already gives us that ability to respond to those areas.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to challenges and risks of integrating AI in Earth observations. This question is for you, Robbie. We wouldn't be talking about AI and leave out the risks associated with it and what you're doing to mitigate them. So what are the potential risks associated with integrating AI into Earth observation systems, such as bias or misuse, and how can these be mitigated?
Yeah, it's a good question. And one that probably we've gotten a lot. Even when we just started the organization, is the ethical elements of being able to take pictures of the planet and who has access to that. And then especially when speed gets a lot better, who has access to it really, really quickly is also, I think, going to be another element that that there might be regulations around, because right now that's currently not regulated. So some of this is technical, and some of it I would probably answer is technical, and then also business and kind of like values judgment around what your products are that you're building. So technically, I think that it's an architecture at scale, which is not really where the industry is today. This industry is really tiny. We're talking about like maybe $10 billion total addressable market a year. It's 3 orders of magnitude less than commercial satellite. And so it's a very, very, very small industry. And it's been really locked up historically for science purposes and also for intelligence purposes. And it's now getting into more tactical with the defense and getting into more commercial, but mainly driven by these AI tools and technologies. So technically, I think that if you are an imagery provider, you need to show the pixel level provenance of your source, so that if there is any sort of deep investigative work, forensic accounting, or needing to actually validate, what data source brought you to make that decision, that we have traceability within our tech stack in order to do that. Then I think the other thing is going to also be a trust score, and this might be something that comes from GEO, that comes from a third-party organization that more or less says, Capella, they govern their data like this and their user data like that. And so, we give them a AAA rating. And same thing with Planet. And so that you could actually then, because you're not going to just rely on one piece of data in order to make a decision, mainly via an application, or it's pushed to you via a phone. It's going to be data fusion. So you have different accuracies of the data sources and different trust. So those are kind of the two technical solutions that I don't think the industry has gotten together yet to develop those standards. We've done it with how to process vast amounts of geospatial data in the cloud, but we haven't really done this in the age of AI yet. And things are moving so fast that, but I do think that like once there is a knee in the curve, we will do ourselves so much of a favor if we bake that into our technical architecture today. So that's a need of standards there. Then on the kind of more values and ethical side, I can say from the very beginning when we started our organization, recognizing technology trends in other sectors, wanting to build a mega constellation of satellites to image the entire world every day, we chose a particular resolution, how far you can zoom into it, for applications that we thought society was ready for. And that was not any sort of personally identifiable information or to see people. It was really around ecosystem change over time, the built environment, and going down to about 3 meters per pixel. And I think that that has served us well as we get into much higher resolution stuff, as we partner deeply with our defense and intelligence customers around the world. We're learning a lot about their world and also how critically important that they believe the trust and accuracy is of our systems. And so much of it is really around your IT systems. It's not necessarily your AI and your models. But I can see when the knee in the curve comes up there, that there can be manipulation of imagery, which we see online, so it's not going to be anything different than that. We have a problem with that already with videos online, and so there are some interesting technologies and companies that are out there that actually show as to whether or not the image has been manipulated between its source and coming to you. But then also non-experts doing armchair expert analysis on top of some of this stuff, which is also what we're seeing online anyway too. So it's not any different than the current world to which we are living in. I think we're fairly responsible actors. Our eyes are wide open on it. And I do think that there will be a knee in the curve where this becomes more of a planetary utility that every company and every country and every community will have access to, near real-time information on the planet, and that we have to bake it into our systems to do that. But think about what our future products are for where we believe the technology and the governance is ready for such powerful information.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to a final question that I'll ask all three of you, because you lend an interesting perspective across what is to come in the horizon. So looking ahead, what emerging AI technologies hold the most promise for advancing Earth observation capabilities? And secondly, can you briefly talk about an upcoming project or technology that excites you in this area? I'll start with Yana, move on to Robbie, and then move on to Frank.
So what's coming up and what excites me? What excites me is that the technology is there, and as more actors hopefully are beginning to see the outcomes when it actually is applied and the kind of insights and decision support that they get from it, more actors will get on board, not just to use the outcomes of that technology, but actually feeding into it. I think we'll be really unlocking the power of harnessing the value of data, and I don't mean just Earth observation, but any data. And AI too can help when we start to also turn non-spatial data sets into spatial data sets, so they can be actually sort of ingested and integrated into GIS system, right? So we can actually deploy geographic approach to any problem solving. Because it's never just about ecosystem loss. It's never about nature loss or environmental change. There are assets within that particular habitat. There are people who live there, that their healths are being impacted by the changes. So when we can actually put and overlay these different information types into a single information system, which is GIS, is very powerful, then we can power so many different types of analytics. But for us to do that, we have to solve the tech problem, and I think that's the easiest part, and AI probably will help us get there a lot faster. But we also have to solve the human part, is wanting to share that. You know, we still have, I think, first thought is there are 100 reasons why I cannot share my data. It's proprietary, it's this and that. But we have to find that one reason why it makes sense to share. And yes, put guardrails around sharing it, not share everything, not put everything up, but enough to allow us for really achieve that systems change, bend the curve of all of the crisis and change. Because in the end, and I think this is how we in the group on Earth Observations think about it, we're really not dealing with projects here and there. What's at stake is the integrity and the equilibrium of the whole Earth system. And everything is global commons that lives on that planet Earth. So I think we have to soak in that mentality, that mindset, that to truly change the system towards, away from the tipping points and towards living in peace and harmony with nature and the planet, we have to actually be willing contributors, not just only consumers, and not just of the resources, but the information too. So by sharing, by feeding, by training this technology with our lived experiences from the operations of the various corporations, from the people who run development, build communities, health outcomes, that's where we're creating the kind of knowledge base that can turn us into intelligent citizens, right? It's going from artificial intelligence to our augmented intelligence. And that happens when we can combine AI with our lived human experiences. So that's what I'm most excited as an opportunity, but that requires us to have so many more conversations and outside of our space AI tech bubble, because it's that other sectors, those other stakeholders that have to come into this space to help build out this powerful utility, which is this knowledge base that we have to then deploy, and deploy fast and smartly.
Thank you. I'll move on to Ravi.
Yeah, well said. And thanks for that human element of it too. We tend to forget that sometimes when we're just like straight in the technology. Is what does that actually mean to the perspective of a globally connected civilization? So thanks for bringing that. I will talk about the tech side that I'm really excited about. That being said, so one is just LLMs are amazing. And they're all becoming multimodal right now, which means it's different data sources. It's not just scraping the internet, but actually taking pictures, and they can take satellite pictures. Just straight out of the gate, it's really, really cool. Now, fine-tuning it, which is taking a foundation model and then making it specific to work actually for remote sensing data, is, I think, going to be a huge game changer. And so that's what I'm most excited about over the next 1 to 2 years. Is to make that possible. And what that will mean is that you don't need to know anything about remote sensing science. It's important for us to have provenance in order to go back through if someone actually uses it in a way that requires that level of fidelity and traceability. So I think multimodal LLMs, fine-trained LLMs with EO data, some people are calling those large Earth models. And that's really cool because like LLMs, the way that they work is that they kind of predict the next word coming out of that. And so then you can imagine what that actually means for ecosystem change over time, getting more toward preparedness around drought areas or potential floods and so forth. And so predictive analytics. And I think on the space segment of things, now this is more like definitely by the end of the decade, is to bake into the mission concepts that you do, recognizing that we're in this world of real-time information. And so that means every satellite needs to have optical inter-satellite links to then talk with each other. It makes space more resilient, it makes space faster, it can go directly down to a user in a variety of different workflows, whether it's a tactical classified workflow or whether it's a farmer in a field. via these direct-to-cell stuff. So real-time connectivity, everything will have edge compute. Our latest satellite that we launched about a month ago is a partnership also with NVIDIA, and it has their Jetson module on board with the Orin chip. And it is so fast that it literally just takes the raw data off the sensor, and we can do analytics on top of that. It's super amazing. We're just beginning to play with that. And I think also the third thing, which is a little bit more speculative, my scientists are thinking I'm a little crazy, but I've still asked them to take a look at it, is to take everything and put it into embedding space. And so what that means is, like, computers don't necessarily see in red, yellow, and what's the other one? Green, yeah, I'm an Earth observation person. They see in math, they see in patterns. And so you can take pictures and put it, it's kind of like taking a mathematical integral to it and put it into a vector space or embedding space. It takes the data size down to 2%, but it doesn't care if you're a radar company or if you're an electro-optical company. So when you have compute and real-time comms, then that means that you can send these embedding spaces back and forth to one another, combine them together to do multi-source fusion in real time, which then might tip another satellite to then go and do the next thing. And before you know it, it just comes down to a text message to a Coast Guard that they need to go in that direction very fast and intercept something or something. So, like, that's kind of, I think, the frontier more on edge compute is with putting everything into embedding space and having that be where the analytics occur.
Thank you. Frank?
All right. I see we have less than 2 minutes. So I'm going to make it fairly quick here. So really it comes down to, for us, we've automated the operations of our satellite, essentially the equivalent of a self-driving car, where we don't have operators operating the satellite. We've even taken that to the mission planning and taken that to tasking for our customers. So a customer doesn't have to actually understand a star satellite system in order to task it to get the results that they're looking for. But what AI really brings to the table, right, is the next level of that automation. The ability to actually move beyond tasking the satellite or looking at the satellites as just sensors, and being able to anticipate the needs of the customer based on their particular problem set and building that into the full automated operations of the system. But a critical component to make that real and make that happen is the ability to train those AI models. And so one of the things that Capella has done is we've made our data set capable of training AI models very effectively by pre-tagging our data. So we have one of the largest unclassified pre-tagged sets of synthetic aperture radar data available to our partners, analytics partners, other people that we're working with, so that they can train their models very efficiently with our infrastructure. It allows us to integrate those AI models into the full automated system. And so I'm really excited about where that can take us, because really, to get to speed, right, and to get to accuracy, right, and trust with the system, you have to be able to train those models effectively. And that's done through having large data sets that are already tagged, that you trust, and you know that the outcome is going to be correct. And then allowing the AI technology to take it from there. And so that's absolutely one of the things I'm excited about. It takes you beyond the satellite, takes you beyond the sensor, right, into a fully integrated capability that actually is relevant to the human consumer.
So thank you for your time, and I will now hand it over to Tricia.